All right, hey, welcome everybody to our Batesburg-Leesville Town Council work session, January 25th, 2021. It's a little after 6, Town Hall Complex. We'll call this work session to order. At this time, I'd ask Jason Krause if you would, Mr. Krause, if you would lead us into invocation, please.
Let's pray. Father, I thank you tonight every day for your grace, the love that you show us, the fact that we exist. Is recognition for help us understand, Lord, what we need to you, how important we are to you, and help us to flip that and understand that we should show the equal deference to you and recognize your importance in what we do every day. And I just pray, Lord, as we move into working about the business of the town, the service of the people, that you would help us gain an understanding and wisdom and work together to accomplish good things for our local body moving forward. It's in your name, Lord Jesus, I pray.
Amen. Thank you, sir. And stand for the pledge. Chief, would you mind leading us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, sir. New business on our agenda this evening is a presentation and discussion of the town's fats, oil, and grease proposed program and ordinance changes. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Town Manager Ted Luckett.
Thank you. Just as a quick reminder, back at the August 10th council meeting, council approved, we're going to try and get this around if you have questions, if you'll ask for the mic, that way when she's doing minutes, she can hear it. Back at the August 10th council meeting, council did approve Summit Engineering to perform modifications to the town's fog ordinance and to implement a fog fat, oils, and grease program for the town. Previously, our ordinance was not much more than about half a page. That is not a quality fats, oils, and grease ordinance. The town has not operated underneath a fats, oils, and grease program in a proactive manner. So Jim Longshore from Summit Engineering is here tonight. Jim's been working on this, and one thing that we talked about is there's no need to recreate the wheel, and I think that was something we discussed back on August 10th, was that we were able to save some money from what we budgeted, because Jim's like, there are plenty of good ordinances out there. Most of the things are common between most cities with slight variations. So I think we can get through this pretty easy and pretty quickly. And also as a reminder before we move in, this was something that DHEC, due to the BOD issues that we were having in their examination of our system, this was one of the things that they found as needs improvement, is the fact that we did not have a fog program in place, and that they asked that we get this done. We're here tonight, Jim's here tonight to talk about his findings, what he came up with, a little bit more about what fog is, the problems it creates, and to talk about each one of you have a draft ordinance in front of you that has been put together. You will see it is certainly much longer than a half page, like we previously have. So without further ado, Jim's going to hop up. He's going to give his presentation. I don't know how he wants to do it. I'll let him ask about that, but I don't know if he wants to entertain questions as he goes or try to get through the program and then have question and answer. I'll let him pick which one works best for him in this. So, Jim, thank you for coming out tonight from Spartanburg. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Actually, it'll be
And since I think I'm going to be 6 feet away from anybody, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this mask off. First of all, I appreciate you inviting me here tonight to talk about the fog program and fats, oils, and greases in general, and particularly about how that impacts your wastewater system and how important having a fog program is going to be to you. So, basic question, what is fats, oils, and grease? We thought we knew, but We combine that together and it comes out fog, which includes animal fats, cooking oils, butter, anything that's used in cooking, and also those things that go down the drain when you clean the dishes that you use to cook with. A lot of fats, oils, and greases get into the sewer system from dishwashers and cleaning utensils and things like that. So that all comes into play when you look at fog. And there are basically two types. The yellow grease, which is unadulterated cooking oil, primarily from deep fat fryers and things like that. This can be recycled. Food service establishments should take that, put it into a recycled container, let a renderer come by, pick it up, and recycle it for some other use. And then there's the brown grease, and that's the heavy stuff that would be collected in grit traps, grit interceptors, that also the stuff that gets into the sewer system and causes problems there. So why is fog a problem? Fats, oil, and greases stick to the inside of sewer pipes. This is the inside of the sewer line. And as you can see, it cuts down the diameter of the pipe, tends to reduce the capacity of that sewer line for carrying wastewater. And if it gets fully clogged, it can cause spills out into residential areas or creeks or just out in the middle of nowhere where somebody's not looking. It also builds up in your pump stations. This is one of the town's pump stations, and you can see it's got a buildup of fats, oils, and greases on top of the pump station. This is something that causes additional maintenance, the town spending money cleaning this stuff up. If it gets into the pipes, into the pumps, which I'll show you a little bit later, it can really cause some problems. So again, very simply, the grease comes out. This could be a restaurant as well as a house. Comes out through the residential service line, gets into the sewers, starts to build up, starts out just a little bit, continues to build up and continues to build up until you get to the point where the sewer lines can be clogged. And again, which leads to overflows and dehydrates involved and things like that. So we want to try and keep as much of this fog out of the sewer system as we can. Now, we don't talk about it a whole lot, and I won't mention as much as we go through, but the fog program and fog ordinance also includes sand and petroleum oils and greases. Sand gets in a number of ways. It could be car washes or cleanup places that wash some sand into lines. When this gets into the sewer system, it can also cause blockages. It plays havoc with mechanical equipment, pump stations, and mechanical equipment at the wastewater plant. So, like I said, I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but just understand that sand and petroleum oils and grease is also included in this program. So here's what happens when sewers back up. You get an overflow. This one's obviously been going on for a while. This one needs immediate attention. It can cause shutdown of downstream water usages, no swimming, no fishing, no overwater usages. And the main thing is it's extremely costly to make repairs and do maintenance on sewer lines when they have fats, oils, and greases built up. Costly to repair, and there's potential fines and ramifications with PDAC when you have these problems with your system. Is there a fog program in Batesburg-Leesville? This is a couple of your pump stations. This is a Lee Street pump station. And you can see the grease built up on top of the liquid in the wet well there.
Where is that?
This is Lee Street pump station.
Down near the
South or north?
I know where he's talking about. I just didn't hear him. Okay.
This is the Hampton Terrace pump station. You can see that there's grease built up here too. And this is one of the pumps from the Hampton Terrace pump station. And when the cover was pulled off, you can see the grease. It just clogged that pump completely. And again, looking at the cost to repair and maintain equipment when you've got these oils and greases in the system. I lost my clicker. Okay. Good technical help's hard to find. Thank you.
No good.
Well, why do we need a fog program? The main thing is to protect the sewer system by reducing overflows. And again, we get back to the maintenance costs associated with that. And also a biggie is DHEC tends to frown upon overflows and problems with the sewer system, so that can lead to the DHEC consent order, which the town is currently operating under. I pulled a couple of statements out of finding of facts in the consent order, and the Alexander Street pump station was overflowing during the DHEC inspection. North Lee Street had an excessive amount of grease. Hampton pump station began overflowing while DHEC was there. And then later DHEC says there's no program to enforce the fire ordinance. So this is pushing us toward taking care of that by getting the fire ordinance. So how do we go about and protect the sewer system? It's all in the book. We develop and implement a fats, oils, and grease management program. And as I go through, I'll talk about different sections of this, but everything should be here. If you have any questions, we can address those as we go. The key elements in a FOG program are having legal authority, permitting and control mechanisms, design standards and plan review, inspections. Of course, you gotta have T, so we gotta have some enforcement. And let me just say this, the FOG program is aimed at food service establishments. It is not something that targets residential users of the sewer system. We would like cooperation and help from the residential users. And the way that we approach that is through public education. We try to let individual residents know that fog is a problem, and they can address a lot of this as they go through meal preparation and cleanup. All right, the first step is legal authority. This comes down from EPA. They talk about meeting requirements for discharge and having a fog program to take care of that. DHEC follows up with that, and they can require fog programs to be implemented if there are problems with the sewer system. And the way that the town does that is by adopting the fats, oils, and grease ordinance. And I think that's what you give a copy of to everybody today. All right. This is the entire fog program. The ordinance is in here. It's Appendix A, but you've got a copy of it there. So that gives you the legal authority to go ahead and implement the fog program and fog control. The next step is the permitting and control mechanisms. Each food service establishment should have a permit to discharge into the sewer system. And what I would suggest is, assuming you adopt a fog program, that we send out letters to each food service establishment and give them time, 30 days, 60 days, whatever the town decides is appropriate, to complete a permit application. Again, this is in the book, Appendix B. Hard to find, and give them a time period to come back and submit that application back to the town. Now, there are permit fees associated with this. There's some recommended fees in the program. I think we start out with $100 application fee, $75 for an annual renewal fee, and things like that. This money is revenue that the town would use to implement the program. You've got inspections, you're gonna have to have somebody go out and look at these grease traps and grease interceptors and make sure they're staying clean and things like that. So it's not new revenue, it's using the revenue from the permits fees to offset the costs for inspections and other costs associated with the program. The next portion of this is having design standards and plan review. Again, it's all in the book. There's design criteria in here and typical design diagrams for how these things should be installed and constructed.
Jim, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Is most of the design elements that are put into this in the current National Building Code for newly established restaurants?
What are we doing with the grease?
I'm not sure how the International Building Code addresses collection.
Grease business.
It's certainly the South Carolina Plumbing Code, and by having it in your fire program, that'll be covered there. But this covers both existing and new food service establishments. So anybody who is already in place and has a grease interceptor is in good shape. Restaurants that don't have anything in place will have to come up with some way to comply with the requirements of the ordinance. The key step in here is the inspections. We can't just put in a grease interceptor and assume it's going to be properly operated for as long as the restaurant's there. The grease traps should be inspected during construction to make sure that what was approved to be installed is actually being installed, that it's set up to properly operate. And these should be inspected at least annually. Somebody from the town needs to go out.
Right. Who's going to have to install these? The restaurants?
Restaurants.
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
most your newly constructed restaurants built within, I don't know, Jim, what would be a reasonable, 10, 15 years?
10 years at least.
They've put them in. They've installed them. A lot of retrofitted restaurants, whether in shopping centers or things like that, most of our existing restaurants now are going to have this in place. We are likely to find that some don't have anything at all. And if they don't, then we're going to have to work with them to get something installed.
How much does that cost?
It just depends on the installation. I would say outdoor grease interceptor is probably looking at $2,000 to $5,000, depending on the specifics of the location and so forth.
All right, so somewhere down, I'm thinking about a place like the Root Cellar. Now they have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's another restaurant that want to come down in that block, say where Wiz is? Where would he put his?
Not all of them are below ground.
Okay.
I mean, they're showing an example there, but there are some, I mean, you don't have to dig up the ground at every retrofitted building and put a grease trap in the ground. There are mobile units and.
Well,
I've
I've been talking just generically about this, but there are basically two types. There's a grease interceptor which goes outside. It's usually below ground. It's got a couple of compartments for access and clean out. There's also a grease trap which can go under a sink, it can go on the floor, it can go in the floor inside the restaurant. We would like to discourage grease traps as much as possible and go for the outside grease interceptors. The grease traps they vary in size depending on capacity, but you're basically looking at something like a large cooler, And these things have to be cleaned more frequently than the outside interceptors. The only way to clean them is basically dip it out with a 5-gallon bucket and take it out and put it in a dumpster, so it's not as clean, it's not as effective. If that's the only way to do it, we can certainly work with the restaurant owner, to put in a grease trap, but whenever possible, I would discourage grease traps inside the facilities as opposed to something that was outside in the ground.
Excuse me, I thought all restaurants had to have grease traps anyway.
Not necessarily without a fine program in place, the restaurant can come in.
I mean, there's a lot of houses that have grease traps, because mine have one.
Mhm.
I mean, so I'm just saying, I thought all restaurants had to have it. I thought it was an requirement for them to have a grease
Not unless
trap.
there's a fine program in place that makes them come in and do it.
Here's a crazy question. What are we gonna do with all the grease?
And we don't do anything with the grease.
No.
Well, what is
The
the
restaurant
Their
owners
responsibility.
have somebody come in and clean it out.
That's
That's part of the maintenance of the
We're dealing
system.
with the grease right now.
It's all in the system.
That's what
We're trying to prevent it from getting,
It would go
The
in the
yellow,
trash.
the yellow grease and the grease from the big fryers and things
It
can
will
be
be destroyed in
recycled.
trash.
The grease is
Hopefully they
collected
bag
in the grease traps and grease interceptors. You have a company that comes in, pumps that out. The interceptor should be pumped at least every 90 days. The interior grease trap should be cleaned at least every 30 days. Whoever comes in and pumps this out will haul it to an approved discharge location. I think the city of Casey takes this, I don't know,
They do, they have an intercept station.
I don't know who else does, but they're,
So
different
we're gonna be,
municipalities are set up to take this.
we'll be legislating the mandate, an extra bill for that business.
I'm sorry, I missed.
We're gonna be generating an extra expense to the business.
Again, I think we're gonna find that 95% plus of the businesses are already having this stuff pumped and hauled off.
Okay.
But
So
that's
why
where's all the stuff coming
Are
from?
we on the issue?
There are some places where it's not occurring and
We're not properly maintained.
we're not properly maintained. There's a lot of places that have grease traps and grease interceptors that were put into place. They're just not getting them pumped as much as they should,
Right.
and it's getting into our sewer
So
system.
we don't have an existing inventory of what we do and do not have. We're talking figures, swag, scientific wild ass, yes.
Right now, if this permit application is gonna go out, and part of the point for that is everybody tell us, give us your contact info, we're gonna be reaching out, we're gonna be coming out for initial inspections, and tell us what you have. And that's where inspections will begin on the grease traps and grease interceptors.
So we would have someone come in, clean them out, and they destroy whatever grease they find.
They
We
have a
inspect,
contract with somebody.
we inspect that they are doing that,
Right.
but it's their responsibility.
Right. And again, most of them are doing it now. I mean, She Leaves has their stuff's being pumped and hauled off. And the fast food restaurants, they're in the ground. They've got, whether it's Pascon or some other company is coming in and they're pumping it out and they're hauling it off. Again, I think most people are doing it now. It's just ensuring that we're inspecting and that it's being done frequently enough that some's not escaping and getting out before it's done.
So it's not causing trouble to the water.
Right,
So
to the sewer lines.
How's this benefiting us?
Show that pump again. Show
It's
a
gonna
picture of that.
reduce our
Show a picture of that
maintenance
pump.
cost on our sewer system. It's also gonna satisfy
Take a
what
look at that pump
supposedly is a
in Hampton, Terrace.
DHEC consent order, which
There's your,
I'd like to
there's
see.
your reason right there.
That Lee Street, that's grease on top of that water there.
These are the
and those
towns-
are all in the Leesville district.
Yes. These
Where
are-
is this, that's South Lee or North Lee?
That's North Lee.
Do we know what feeds these? I mean, North Lee, restaurants I'm not familiar with. Hampton Terrace restaurants, no. Hampton Terrace restaurant, well, that's the same issue, same location.
That's kind of what we're gonna get with our GPS study, right? Where all the plumbing is.
And Tim might be
The
able to tell
North
you.
North Lee Street pump station serves the downtown Leesville area. Hampton Street's pretty much residential. And then we got that large pump station that serves the schools and a residential area as well.
So the Lee
It's on
Street-
Greg Street.
The Lee Street is indicative of restaurant discharge. The Hampton Terrace is primarily, if not 95% residential.
And
Okay, so we do have a residential problem too.
back up to
All right.
that inside.
And we pump
I
those
think
Yeah, that's
County
what-
came in afterwards.
Right.
6 times a year.
That's what I was gonna ask him to do as
All
well.
right.
Yeah.
Now, this is the inside of the sewer line. And you can see the grease is built up on the walls of the pipe. And as it continues to build up, it's gonna restrict the flow till you get to the point where it won't carry the wastewater and you're gonna have sewer overflow.
How long does it take for a pipe to get in that condition?
Again, it varies. It could be 6 months or it
6
could be
months.
6 or 8 years, just depending on how much
Yeah.
grease.
I can tell you,
No, you don't.
I have seen that pipe in my work life. And we clean our internal sewer
Yeah.
pipes of grease every 6 months before it even
Because
gets to the
to
ground.
get that type of buildup, it would take longer than 6
Of course,
months.
new stuff is people see.
It would take longer than 6 months to get that type of buildup.
I've seen it
Ain't
build up
nobody
6 months.
stupid.
All right, so we were talking about inspections. Again, the outside grease interceptors should be inspected at least annually. If you've got inside grease traps, they need to be inspected more frequently and be cleaned more frequently. The food service establishments are required to keep records of when the grease interceptors were pumped, who pumped them, and so forth. And during the inspection, you should go through and check those to make sure that they are being cleaned out in the frequency that's required. And then we want to try and encourage the food service establishment to institute best management practices. It sounds ominous, but it's really common sense. We want to do things like recycle waste oil whenever we can. Put it in a container, let a rendering company come out and pick it up and recycle it. Make sure that the fog control device, whether it's a trap or an interceptor, is properly maintained and cleaned out like it's supposed to be. Instead of just washing everything down the sink, wipe it out first and put that in the trash can and get as much out before it goes into the sewer line as possible. Keep strainers in the sinks to pull out any solids that may be in there. I got some great signs. Whoever's doing the inspection can put some signs on the wall or give them to the food service.
Oh, I need some new signs.
People to pass it around.
Been there, done that. Ran a restaurant.
Here's the thing, so they gotta grab their grease, like from the French fry place, that's when you done it.
This
And
is my
they
favorite,
typically
put
they
that
have-
right over the sink.
They don't dump fryers.
Yeah, this is a
They
practice
put
that
them
we had to change
special
in my-
containers and then have it
30
recycled.
years ago.
Actually, there is a market, there is a market for fryer grease, all right? I don't think
So what about the
a big
grease that's going
restaurant,
in the sink?
a big restaurant would see that as a revenue stream.
Down the sink.
What about the,
Jake,
yeah,
I don't think I don't think the biggest problem right now is, and I don't know, pick a restaurant, Me Rancho. There's grease left in the pot. For the most part, I don't think most of them are just taking and pouring that grease in mass droves down. But what happens is even after you pour, you still got that residual amount left in there, and it's lined all on the sides of the pot. And when you start putting water and soap on that, that typically does go down. But if you continuously are washing pots and plates in a restaurant, and you're constantly sending a lot more fat souls and grease down there than what you realize. I mean, to think that someone's just taking a big pot of grease and pouring it down, I don't think that happens. But it's amazing how much fat, oil, and grease can come off of washing dishes. And that's where these grease traps come in as it flows
So
through the sewer line.
it's gonna be the grease trap in their sinks?
Oh,
No, the grease traps,
Do the water have to run through their trap?
you might have to.
The way, I mean, I don't understand.
Wasn't
There's
there a
a trap
diagram?
and a interceptor.
A lot
Trap
of it
goes
comes from
underneath the
automatic
sink.
dishwasher.
Right.
All right, some you may or may not have them. An interceptor goes outside, typically it's big enough, it goes outside. It holds the entire flow of water coming out of the establishment, other than the restrooms, all right?
yeah.
So
Everything
the
should be plumbed into
residential,
that.
the residential one that he showed, you're saying that all, from all of the residents, it would still go to the same one, but it would be cleaned out?
No, residences don't have to have grease traps.
You probably have one because you're on a septic tank. My house has one.
No, I'm on the city board.
Okay, my house was on
My
a
father
septic
did
tank.
the house. He
When we
knew what
went
he
to
was
city,
doing.
we
He's
put, we
intelligent. Look,
just connected.
okay, so the one that you showed that came from the residents, okay? And if the residents are still gonna be doing the same thing, how are you gonna stop it?
We're gonna educate the public, that's part of the program, is public education. And we're gonna try to let people know that fog is a problem and ask them to control the grease that goes down the drain. We can't make them do it, we're asking them to do it as a public service, just like, I was gonna mention this later, when my grandkids come to my house, I better not put a plastic bottle or a Mountain Dew can in the trash can. It's gotta go in the recycle. So if we can educate people so they're doing the same thing with fats, oils, and grease, we can get a lot of this out of the residential sewer lines as well.
But my question is, if, you know, you can talk to somebody all you want, doesn't mean that they're gonna do it.
Correct.
So if they're still doing it, what are we gonna do with that problem? That's what I'm saying.
There's really no way we can enforce, police, residential.
So that would still be a problem at that particular point, at that particular place? Okay.
I mean, we're not gonna be going into houses and inspecting anything. We have to put our trust in and try and educate them that.
Now, I was just wondering, if you don't get people to do what they're supposed to do, in the condition of that type that he showed, if they still do it, then you still have no control over that.
Right. But again, the majority of the issues that clog up sewer lines and cause problems, heavy operation and maintenance calls, are coming from commercial entities, not residential. Residential can contribute, but it's the
That one he
commercial
showed
that's
was
causing it.
residential. The one he showed was residential, so it does come from residents too.
It does. It
Okay.
does, just
All
not
right.
as bad as heavy commercial.
Okay.
Okay, we mentioned grease traps and grease interceptors. This is a grease trap. You can get some idea of the scale. This is a shipping pallet that it's sitting on. But this is what would go inside, under a sink, sit on the floor, let the water go through it, or you can even put it in the floor.
How much does that cost?
Just to purchase it, probably $500 to $750.
And usually it has to be emptied a lot more than another one.
Yeah, again, you would,
It isn't pretty.
they tend to discourage these because of the maintenance issues and more inspection time required.
But if you run a sub shop, that may be economical. Faithful Cafe,
It may be.
I Crave Coffee. I can give you a long list that, if they went with the interceptors, quick carry, it would bankrupt them or put them out of business.
You bring up a good point. If a sub shop, take a 7-Eleven, you can go to 7-Eleven, buy a sandwich out of the refrigerator, put it in a microwave, and leave. That's not considered a food service establishment under the ordinance, because they're not doing any cooking and cleanup.
But
you
if
got-
they serve a pizza,
if
and they
serve
have a pizza oven,
and cook it there,
that is a food service.
yes.
So that would cover anyone who has Hunt's Pizzas. All right, okay, just trying to establish a starting line.
If they clean up and have something there, then they would fall under the
If
ordinance.
DHEC says a 3-hole sink, you're talking fog.
So, back to best management practices, again, it sounds big, but it's just common sense things. We want to try to wipe off pots and pans and utensils before they go in. We put our signs up there to make people aware, people that work in the restaurant aware. And that, again, falls into training and educating the restaurant employees about fog and trying to control it.
You'll be surprised what they might pour down there. I was. Seen it.
The next step in this is the enforcement. And again, the ordinance has to have teeth, and this is it. There's a number of remedies or steps, some informal steps to be taken is issue a notice of deficiency. We can have a meeting with the food service establishment owner, whoever, and just sit down and talk to them about why we're doing this, what needs to be done. And in that, we can get a feel for whether they're going to try and cooperate or not. We can require them to initiate some self-monitoring, where they go out, maybe on a weekly basis, and check the depth of grease in the grease trap and that sort of thing. And we can require them to schedule their employees for training on the importance of the fog program. And from that, we get into the more formal enforcement actions. We can send a notice of violation. We can charge them civil penalties up to $2,000 a day for violations. We can do consent orders if they're agreeable to doing certain things on a certain schedule. If they're not agreeable, then we can move to an administrative order. And one of the big things, if we've got a chronic violator and there's a sewer blockage downstream from that restaurant and the line overflows and there's cleanup costs associated with it, we can make them responsible for the cleanup cost. And then worst comes to worst, absolute worst, we can terminate water and sewer service to them.
That is if we incorporate those benefits.
Yes.
These are not state, these are not covered by state,
That's covered in the ordinance.
but it's not covered by, it's not a state mandated.
No.
All right.
No, it's just like any other local ordinance,
So-
it's covered in there.
Now, we're gonna have people grandfathered in, the people now, or we're gonna mandate that they upfit their kitchen?
Everybody is gonna be required to comply with the fog program, whether they do it through an internal